Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Inshallah ta'ala, we continue with this story of this great Imam, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala. In the first 4 parts, over the last 4 weeks, we discussed the birth of this great Imam and how he was an orphan. We mentioned that the Imam, that he was born in Rabi al-Awwal in the year 164 after the Hijrah, which is equivalent to 780 Gregorian calendar. We said this great Imam, Hafidhullah, he sought hadith at a young age, at the age of 15. And that he had many shuyukh. And we mentioned from amongst them was the likes of Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, and Abi Na'im, and Abdul Razak, and Abi Bakr ibn Abi Shayba, and Ali ibn al-Madini, and other than them, rahimahumullah. We also said that there were many of the shuyukh who narrated from him, such as Imam Bukhari, and Imam Muslim, and Abu Dawood, and Nasa'i, and Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. And also his shuyukh narrated from him, such as Abdul Razak, and Ali ibn al-Madini, as well as Yahya al-Dhuhayli, and Yahya ibn Ma'in narrated from him, and Abu Zura'a, Abu Hatim, and other than them. We said that this great Imam, by the time that one of his shuyukh had died, his first sheikh, one of his primary scholars, by the name of Hushaym ibn Bashir, that he died when Imam Ahmad was around 19 or 20, and by then, Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, had already narrated over 3,000 narrations from him. We also mentioned that this great Imam, he traveled extensively, that he made Hajj several times, as well as going to Basra in Yemen and other than that. We also said the description of this Imam, that he was tall, he was tan, and that it was said that he used to wear extremely white thobe. Excuse me. We also mentioned that he was humble, he had humility, and that at a young age, it was mentioned that there was no one more knowledgeable than him in Iraq, or in Basra, in that area, in Baghdad. We also mentioned that this Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, that he lived in a time where the innovators started to take hold. And as Imam Zahabi mentioned, that the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah, وكذلك, and of course, primarily in this time, the Jahmiyyah. And we mentioned that Jahm ibn Safwan was the one who made this belief of the Quran being created prominent. And we gave the isnad, or the chain of where it came from, that this belief came actually from a Jew who practiced magic on the Prophet ﷺ. But nonetheless, we said that the belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is that the Quran is the kalam of Allah. وَلَيْسَ مَخْلُوقٌ. It is a speech of Allah and it's not created. And it's a speech that can be heard. It's a speech that can be heard. It's not something as the Ash'ari and other than them from these deviant groups say that Allah has speech. They say, but the speech is within himself. It's not a speech that is heard. we can attack this from different point of views, not only from Kitab and Sunnah, but logically, or if you take it from the Lughat al-Arabiyyah, if you take it from the Arabic language itself, Kalam has different aspects, and one of them is that it must be a speech that is heard and not written. It is a speech. If you look in Ajurumiyya, it explains that speech. One aspect of it is that it is something that must be heard. So the kalam of Allah, it is speech, something that is heard. So as we mentioned, that they started to spread this ideology that the Quran was created, and they started to persecute Ahl Sunnah with this belief, and they started to imprison them. And we mentioned that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, that he stood firm, although that he had a principle to stand upon. He mentioned the hadith of Khabbab that we mentioned, that he said, what are you going to do with this hadith of Khabbab? Wherein, excuse me, that they brought the leaders forth in their time, and they tried to make them denounce their religion. And they split them in half, and they stood firm upon this. They did not denounce their religion. Imam Ahmad took this position. And we said that there were 3 other men with him, and then 2 of them consented. And then him and Muhammad ibn Nuh were left. And we said this young man, Muhammad ibn Nuh, he died on the journey. Then we mentioned Imam Ahmad was by himself. And we said that the ulama mentioned that Ahl Sunnah, or the deen, was saved twice. One in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, in the trials of the apostates. When the people, after the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had died, and the people thought that they didn't have to practice Islam any longer, or they didn't have to give the zakat. They thought it was like a tax you paid to a king or something, or a leader. And Abu Bakr, he was by himself, said that he would wage war against them. And then the other companions had realized that what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq stood upon was correct. Because I believe he had mentioned that the salat and zakat was mentioned 82 times in the Quran together. You cannot separate it. Whoever separates it, they're disbelievers. And the ulama said the other time Islam was saved in the time of the mihna, or the trial of Imam Ahmad. So we see that he was imprisoned, he was beaten, he was lashed, man after man. They would make sure that they had men lined up to beat him, so they can make sure that he would get a proper beating, so to speak. So they wanted the men to have their full strength, because it takes strength to beat someone. You can become tired. Your arms can become tired by beating someone. So they wanted to make sure the men had full strength in order to make this Imam succumb, rahimahullah. But he refused to. And we mentioned that he was moved from prison to prison, place to place. He was moved also in a barn of one of the leaders, we mentioned. We mentioned he's put in a main prison. He's put it in another place. And we mentioned that he was chained. And sometimes on a riding beast, he will fall down because of the heavy chains. And we said that we bring people to debate with him, this great Imam, that every time they lose the debate, they will order more shackles to be placed upon his feet. And we said that the only times these shackles he removed, he would slip his foot out of one of the shackles on his foot when he was sleeping, and or when he was praying, making salat. So we mentioned he went through the Caliphate of of Ma'mun, who he never met. He prayed that he would not meet him. He had died before Imam Ahmad reached him, because he ordered Imam Ahmad to be brought to him. We also mentioned that after him was Mu'tazim, and he suffered what he suffered from him. But then we mentioned that he had repented to Allah Azza wa Jal. He repented. Imam Ahmad, there was patience, and there was da'wah, and there was strong da'wah. And as Allah said in the Quran, who is better in speech? The one who calls to Allah and says, I'm from the Muslimin. So there's no one who's better in speech. And Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he proved this. So he proved this in Mu'tasim, he had repented. He mentioned to Imam Ahmad a dream that he had about the angels. When the lions came to him to attack him, and the angels came down, and the angels seemed to safeguard him, and they mentioned to him about the dream Imam Ahmad had. And then when Imam Ahmad told him about another dream, a long dream he mentioned about, we said that Mu'tasim had jumped up, and he immediately said he spoke the haqq, and he struck the neck, or the necks of those who harmed him, Bishop Marisi and his companion Ibn Abi Dawood, who had harmed him, and had him beaten extensively. So we mentioned that he had ordered their necks to be striked. Mu'tasim ordered their necks to be striked after he repented to Allah Azza wa Jal and realized what Imam Ahmad was saying was the haqq. So then we mentioned also Wathiq, which is the third leader, Wathiq. So after Mu'tasim, and after he punished Bishop al-Marisi and Ibn Abi Dawood, after he did this, then these two individuals still lived, and this Wathiq, he supported them. He supported these individuals, and he carried on the imprisonment, or he banished Imam Ahmad from being in Baghdad. So this is where we left off at, and we said from that we get into the next leader. So we're gonna recap from the trial of Wathiq, the mihna of al-Wathiq, and then we're gonna go into the next leader, Mutawakkil. We're gonna talk about that just briefly. Inshallah, we're gonna talk about the sickness and the death of this great Imam, which concludes this biography of this great Imam. As I mentioned, although it's in five parts, we still have not done any justice to the life of this great Imam. Because as I mentioned, Imam al-Zahabi, rahimahullah, he brings over 200 and some odd pages about this great Imam. So we recap with the mihna of al-Wathiq. And we said that Qala Hanbal, which is a cousin of Imam Ahmad, that he said after Abu Abdullah recovered, meaning Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, from the lashes, that he would attend the Jum'ah and the congregational prayers. And we would narrate a hadith and deliver fatwa until Al-Mu'tasim died and his son Al-Wathiq became the ruler. And he manifested what he manifested in relation to the Quran being created. Al-Mihna bi khalq al-Quran. وفرق بين فضال الأنماطي وبين امراته. We mentioned that he had separated Fudal al-Anmati from his wife, excuse me, and also Abi Salih from his wife. So they would, as we mentioned, they would separate people in the time of Wathiq from their wives if they did not say the Quran was created. And we mentioned that Imam Ahmad would pass fatwa, letting people know it's not sufficient enough if the Imam was to say, or the leader was to say, he was separated from your wife, because there was no certain death. It has to be certain death. This principle of pronouncing or announcing that the Quran is created, you cannot say it if they just threaten you with divorce, separating you from your wife. He said it's not sufficient. What's sufficient is that if you're certain that you're going to die, this is how this principle is upheld, or this principle is practiced. So they separated, as we mentioned, these two people from their wives, Abu Abdullah from his wife, and Mati from his wife. And then we mentioned that Abu Abdullah would be present for the Jum'ah. But he would repeat his prayers when he returned home. Because, as we know, someone who leaves Islam for bid'ah mukaffara, or someone who's upon kufr that made him leave Islam from the nullifiers of Islam, or upon shirk billah, we cannot pray behind that person because that person is not considered to be a Muslim. But in the time of Imam Ahmad, there was no option except that he prayed behind them. But what he would do, he would go home and he would repeat his prayer. And he would encourage everyone else to do the same. For those who as he mentioned here, as Imam Zabi mentioned, من قال بهذه المقالة, those who have this saying, meaning that the Quran is created, he would order them to repeat their prayer, Imam Ahmad, after they made the salat. And he would encourage them to go to the salat, to the Jum'ah, because of the virtue of the Jum'ah, because of the virtue of that day. So he mentioned this. And we mentioned that a group of people had came to Imam Ahmad, to Abu Abdullah, and that the matter had grown widespread and very serious. And they feared that it become even worse. And they mentioned that Ibn Abi Dawood, the one who previously struck his neck, who beat his neck, and then Mu'tasim, after he repented, he beat his neck. They said that he ordered, or he was about to order the teachers to teach their children in the school. In other words, if these people were to start to teach the children in school, that means the children would be taught Al-Quran, as Imam Zahabi said, Al-Quran kada wa kada. That the Quran is like this or like this, meaning that the Quran is created. And they said they was not pleased. They were not pleased. And remember we said that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he exhorted them to be patient. To be patient. To be patient with this. He did not order them to report. He ordered them to be patient. And we mentioned this. And we gave some examples about the Shaykh al-Rabi' hafidhahullah, when he mentioned about the Shaykh in India who was hit by a pickaxe by an innovator, and when he fell unconscious and he woke up, he asked the people in the prison where the man was at. And the people said, Shaykh, he's in prison. He said, release him. They said, we can't do that. So he went and visited the man. When he found the man had a family, he took care of this man's family until he was released from the prison. And this man became Salafy afterwards. And we said this is the way of the ulama. And other such events that we mentioned in relation to the people being patient upon the harm that comes their way. And we said that this is how we should be. We should be patient because people are going to harm us. And it's not something that we think we're going to enter into the arena of da'wah or the arena of trying to call the people to Islam. And there's not going to be any repercussion behind it. There's not going to be any consequences. It's not like that. It is what the shabab should really know, because sometimes we mention the youth, they don't see or they don't know. When they look at someone, they look at the Imam, or they look at the student, or the caller to Allah, and they only think about the prestige, or how people may look at this person. People may look up to this person. And then when you see that this person, he may have studied with Sheikh such and such, or this, Sheikh, or they look at him, mashallah, the other is coming, smoothly off his tongue, and he's bringing this quote and that quote, and they see the nice white thobe. They don't know the true reality of this person. And the reality is that most students, and Allah Ta'ala, I'm not saying that they're not any who are not, but most students are struggling. It's not easy, trying to balance between taking care of your family and trying to, call to Allah and trying to study the deen of Allah. It's not an easy affair. It's not an easy affair at all. So they only see, what's in front of them at that time, at that lecture, but they don't know the in-betweens. They don't know that he's being tried and tested, maybe with his family. He's being tried and tested with his kids. He's being tried, because the more that you have iman, the more you're tested. As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he mentioned that when they asked who was tested the most, he said, the prophets and messengers. Then who? Thumma anta. Then those who are similar to them. Then who? Then those who are similar to them. So he mentioned two people after that. And ulama, I remember once hearing one of the scholars explain this many years ago. He said that when the messenger said those who are similar to them, he said this means after the prophets and messengers were the scholars. And then he mentioned another one, those who are similar to them. And they said that, meaning the callers to Allah. And then the messenger said in the end of the hadith, a person will be tested until there's no more sin left in him. So, the more that you cling to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the more that you call to it, and the more that you implement it and understand it, the more you can be tried and tested. So it's not like you're going to have a, happy-go-lucky life. Everything's going to be, white picket fences, apple pie in the window, everybody's happy, It's going to be trials and tests along with that. Look at some of the Sahaba. When they wanted to make the hijrah to Medina. And some of them, their wives complained, are you going to leave this behind, what we have? And they stayed behind. And when they came later, they were upset because of their families, because they seen that the other companions had learned more than them. And they missed out. But Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us about this, that your family are a fitna for you, but be patient. You see? So forgive, He mentions. So, it's going to be a trial. So, it's not all, roses, and all everything's happy. It's not like that. There's going to be times of ease and times of hardship. So Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he went through this. He went through these trials. He went through these things, and he had to go into hiding, as we mentioned. He had to go into a cave. And he mentioned how the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in a cave with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He mentioned this. He remained in there for 3 days. And then he moved on. And then Imam Ahmad mentioned to his companion, is it not fitting or befitting that we should follow the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in times of ease and abandon it in times of hardship? So in other words, if the Messenger did that, let's do the same thing. And we also mentioned that Imam Babahari, who was a student of the student of Imam Ahmad, he also had to go into hiding until he died. And we mentioned this. So, this was in the time of Wathiq, and we said that it was extremely short. It wasn't that much that Imam Zahabi brought. So now, in concluding this, and hopefully in the next 25 or 30 minutes, and Allah Ta'ala A'lam, let's now talk about the last phase of the great Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, the great phase of his life, the last phase of his life. And his phase was during the time of Mutawakkil. And this time was a little bit easier. It was an easier time for Ahl Sunnah. And Al-Mutawakkil was the brother of Wathiq. And his time was a little easier for him. So once again, Qala Hanbal was the cousin of Imam Ahmad. He said, Wali al-Mutawakkil, Ja'far. So he said, then Mutawakkil, Ja'far, he assumed his position of the leader, or he assumed power. And therefore, Allah made the Sunnah manifest. He made it manifest. وَفَرَجَ عَنَ النَّاسِ. He made it manifest and revealed and relieved the people. Relieved the people. وكان أبو عبد الله يحدثون ويحدث أصحابه في أيام متواكل. So, after Allah had relieved the people from that oppression, and He made the Sunnah manifest, Abu Abdullah, meaning Imam Ahmad, he used to narrate to them, he said. He used to narrate to us. And he narrated to his companions. And this was during في أيام متواكل, during the times of Mutawakkil. وسمعته يقول ما كان الناس إلى الحديث والعلم أحواج منهم إليه في زماننا. And he said that during the time of Mutawakkil, he had said that people were never in a greater need of the hadith and knowledge than they were in our time. So you see that during Mutawakkil's era, it became a little more easier. And he supported the people of the Sunnah. So, so they were allowed to do these things. Because Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he was not allowed earlier. As we mentioned, he was banned in the time of Wathiq. And we mentioned that Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah, similar happened to him. And you see, this is the way of the people who follow the ulama. The way the people who follow the anbiya and the mursaleen. It's going to be like that. Because these are after the prophets and messengers, these are the ones who, they inherit the legacy of the prophets and messengers. They don't inherit any dinar or dirham. Because the messengers, the prophets and messengers, they don't inherit. And nor do their relatives. They don't inherit. And they don't, of course, get the zakat, like this. So, but what they leave behind as a inheritance is knowledge. And this is what the ulama have taken. As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had mentioned, that the anbiya warathatul anbiya. That the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So, they're going to inherit not only the knowledge from them, they will also inherit the harm that came with that, with their duty. And also they're going to inherit the respect that they had, because they're teaching from that of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they're closest to the son of the Messenger. Because Allah said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. That those who fear him from his servants are the scholars. So, and Ibn Abbas said about this verse, because they know the halal from the haram. So, Imam Ahmad, dun Wathiq, he was banished. He was put out. But now, he's allowed to, in the time of Mutawakkil, now he's allowed to go back to teaching and doing these things. So it goes on to say that, قال صالح ibn Ahmad, قال أبي, قال لي إسحاق ibn Ibrahim, اجعلني في حل من خضوري دربك. So he said that Salih ibn Ahmad said, my father said to me, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim said to me, forgive me for being present at your beating. Forgive me for being present at your beating. So I said, have you already forgiven all those present? I have forgiven all those who are present. I have forgiven all those جعلت كل من حضرني في حل. I've forgiven all those who are present. I've already forgiven all those who are present. And then he said to me, from where have you said that it is not created? From where have you said that it is not created? From where have you said that it is not created? So I said, Allah said in the Quran, surely His is the creation and the command. أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ. Surah Araf, 54th ayah. So he asked them about, from where have you said that it is not created, meaning that the Quran is not created? He said, so I said, Allah said, أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ. And here it's interesting to note that Allah, right, here, أَلَا لَهُ خَلْقُ وَأَمْرُ. It's really, this right here is like a tawqeed. It's like a tawqeed. When it says it's not for him, the creation and the command. So here, this word, alif, lam, alif, alif, lam, ala lahu khalq wal amr, is not for him, the creation and the command. Here, it's an emphasis that, of course, it is for Allah, the creation and the command. So here it emphasizes, that the creation and the command is for Allah. It's Surah Araf, the 54th ayah. Excuse me. I'm sorry, let me grab my glasses, please, because it's getting kind of, give me a second so I can grab my glasses, because I think I need them. Give me 1 second, inshallah. No. So he goes on to say, so he distinguished between creation and command. فَفَرَقَ بَيْنَ الْخَلْقِ وَالْأَمْرِ. So Imam Ahmad said he distinguished between creation and the command. فَقَالَ إِسْحَاقَ الْأَمْرِ مَخْلُوقٌ. So then Ishaq, he said, the command is created. He said the command is created. So Imam Ahmad, he said, yes, subhanallah, right? Meaning, glorifies Allah or frees Allah from all imperfections. He said, so something created, which is creation. So he's now bringing that to him. And he said, the created things were created through his command. With him saying, kun, be. So by him saying this, these things were created by his command. And he said, then he said to me, who do you report this saying that it is not created from? So I said, from Ja'far ibn Muhammad. And he said, قَالَ لَيْسَ بِخَالِقٍ وَلَا مَخْلُوقٍ. He said, it is neither a creator nor is it created. So you see that they continue to argue with Imam Ahmad. They continue to argue with Imam Ahmad about his position of the Quran being created. So although he had a little more freedom, as relates to Mutawakkil, but the people of innovation still existed. And they still tried to argue the fact of their position that the Quran is created, and that the speech of Allah is created, and that, as some of the people, like I said, Ash'ari and others said, that it's a speech within themselves. And as I mentioned, the people who hold these positions, a lot of times they're not arguing the fact because they, so to speak, outright deny the attributes of Allah. Some of them try to, what they consider to purify Allah, make Allah free from His creation. Because they say the first part of the verse, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. Right? They say that there's nothing like Allah. So they use this to say, well, there's nothing like Allah, so we have to keep Allah free from His creation and not make Him like His creation. So therefore, He can't have speech. He has speech, things like His creation. But Ibn Taymiyyah is to refute them with the second part of the verse. He's to say that the innovator always takes the part of the evidence and not all of it. So the second part of the verse is وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, is all hearing and all seeing. So this proves He has attributes. So when you bring it together with the first part, it proves that He has attributes, but they're not like His creation, because He negated that in the first part of it. So a lot of them, they did not negate Allah's attributes outright as a sense of this trying to negate it. They tried to do what they thought was trying to purify Allah from His creation, and therefore they thought being upon correct tawheed. So, but this shows you that you can't use the aql over the naql. You cannot use the intellect over the revelation. And this is why tafsir has a method that we mentioned before, that the Quran first explains the Quran. If you can't find that, then the authentic hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam explains the Quran. And then if not, then you look at the statement of the likes of Ibn Abbas, because he was tarjuman on the Quran, as the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for him that he has hikmah, wisdom, and he be the interpreter of the Quran. So they would use their own intellect when it comes to the Quran. So we see Imam Ahmad that he refuted them. So, nevertheless, Imam Zahabi goes on to say that, Imam Zahabi said, in the book he says, Kuntu, meaning I say, meaning Imam Zahabi, he said that the matter as it was established is that Abu Abdullah, meaning Imam Ahmad, used to say, whoever says that my recital of the Quran is not created is an innovator. And he used to say, whoever says that my recital of the Quran is created, then he is a Jahmi. Once again, Imam Ahmad used to say that, Imam Zahabi said that he used to say that those who say that, and I'm explaining this, that my recital, because this is a tricky way to do it now, that my recital, that it came later, my recital of the Quran is not created, is an innovator. So whoever say that his recital of the Quran is not created is an innovator. And he used to say, whoever says that my recital of the Quran is created, then he's a Jahmi. So, because this is what they did. They say the Quran is the kalam of Allah. And the kalam of Allah, it's created. So now, Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Salafiyun, they say no. The Quran, kalam Allah, wa laysa makhluq. It's not created. So they couldn't win this argument. So later they started to say, okay, when you recite the Quran, is it your speech or Allah's speech? And some confused people would say, well, of course, yes, it's my speech. They would say, okay, well, so if the Quran is not created, it's the claim of Allah, and you're reciting it, it's your speech, and you recite the Quran, so therefore it's created. So now they trick the awam, the common people, and the novice, the beginning students. And they trick the people, who accept the ulama, who understand it, and those who are mutamakinin, who are firmly grounded in aqidah, sahihah. So now, they think they got Ahl Sunnah cornered. But no. When you recite the Quran, it is your speech that is coming out of your mouth, but it's the same Quran, which is the kalam of Allah, that is not created, that is being recited. So your speech is created, but not the speech of the Quran, because it's the kalam of Allah. So, this is how we understand it. So, Imam Ahmad said, whoever says that my recital of the Quran is not created is an innovator. So meaning that if you say that your speech is not created, because this is how some of the people try to get out of it. They would say, well, no, my speech is not created. And they didn't understand how to get out of that problem. It was polemical for them. It was very problematic. So they didn't understand how to get out of it. So they said that, okay, then my recital of the Quran is not created. Imam Ahmad said, whoever says this, then you're an innovator. Because your recital, your speech is created, but that Quran you're reciting is not created. It's still the same Quran. It's still the same speech of Allah. And he said, whoever says the Quran is created, then he's a Jahmi. And I hope I can clarify that in Allah Ta'ala A'lam. And if not, our brother Abu Abdul Salam Al-Joyini can clarify for you at another time or after the class if it wasn't clear, and Allah Ta'ala A'lam. So nonetheless, he goes on to say, he mentioned, so he rahimahullah, did not say either of the two. Sometimes he would clarify that by saying, whoever says, my recital of the Quran is created, meaning by that the Quran, and he is a Jahmi. Then he goes on to say that Allah, Ahmad ibn Zand, سمعت أحمد يقول, I heard Ahmed say that the statement of, meaning that the recital of the Quran is created, meaning my recital of the Quran is created. He said they are worse than the Jahmiyyah. Sharru min Jahmiyyah. Whoever says that my recital of the Quran is created is worse than the Jahmiyyah. They're worse. He said he heard Imam Ahmad say this. Some various narrations of the people who may fall into these statements based on the predominance of the Jahmiyyah. So he's clarifying various examples so Ahl Sunnah won't fall into it. And Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we should ground ourselves in Aqidah. And this is why I said, and it's not to say the Quran is not important, because no doubt the Quran is truly important, but how we understand the Quran today, and how we learn the Quran today, we're not doing it in the way of the Salaf. And in fact, the Salaf used to say that we learn Iman before we learn the Quran. Authentic narration. And I encourage you to go back to look his narration up. That we learned the Quran before we learned Iman. And then when the Quran was sent down, it increased our Iman. So, but today, this is what I'm saying. Today, we learn Quran before we learn Iman. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning Quran with Iman. meaning with the aqidah. There's nothing wrong with that. But you'll find a lot of people, they're happy that they're choosing the hufaz of the Quran, he's hafiz, but then you'll find that they have a twisted aqidah. So if you memorize the whole Quran, and that's not the intent of the Quran, as ulama say, it's not the intent to memorize it. The intent is to act by it. So you have people who memorize the whole Quran, and the Quran, as Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala said, kulluhu tawheed. All of it is tawheed. All of it is tawheed. All the Quran is tawheed. So, you'll find a person who memorizes the Quran, but yet he's Sufi, he believes wahdatul wajud, or hulul. Right? That Allah is the true reality is Allah in reality. Everything is Allah. Or Allah is incarnate in His creation. But yet he memorized the whole Quran. How is it going to benefit him? And this is why the ulama say the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that the best of you are those who learn the Quran, alamahu, right? And teach the others. Right? Those who learn the Quran and teach the others. Alamahu, and teach the others. So, and it said here, interesting to note, that they didn't say who memorized the Quran, it's who learned it. And also, ulama point out a point saying that the intent is not to memorize the Quran. They say when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said Allah intends good for you, He gives you the understanding of the religion. يُفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. So they say here, He said the understanding and not the hifz, the memorization of it. So, many more evidences. So, it's important that we ground ourselves in Aqidah to understand this. Because this, not to say don't memorize it. No, I'm not saying, yes, memorize the Quran. But what I might say, if it comes between memorization and understanding, they say that understanding takes more preference. And that, but it's better to bring the two together, to memorize and understand. But if you cannot do both, then understanding takes preference over memorization. And also, memorizing the Quran, as ulama mentioned, that it is mustahab, highly recommended. But those things from Aqidah are fard'ain. You have to know who Allah is. Allah says, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. So it's a fil amr, verb of command, in Surah Muhammad, 19th ayah, where Allah says, so know. So it's a command. You have to know La ilaha illallah. You have to know it. You see? So I'm not saying, don't misinterpret my words. I'm not saying don't learn the Quran. I'm not saying this. What I'm saying is that we must ground ourselves in Aqidah, become mutamakinin. And then once you remove ignorance from yourself, which is the intent of knowledge, and then you remove it from your families and those who are around you, right? Then you must, after you get grounded in that, you must start to understand about these various groups of deviation, because they come with many tricks. And they sometimes they trick the youth. And a lot of them now, what they've done, they know, like the old saying, you can't beat them, join them. Or like the munafiqeen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would pretend to be Muslim. So now you have a lot of them pretending to be Salafy. They get the youth. So they come with the lingo. Like, for instance, Sayyid Qutb, we know it was clear. His da'wah was batil. He had an Ikhwani da'wah, he had a Khawarij da'wah, a Shia da'wah, whatever kind of da'wah. Let's all get along da'wah, Rodney King da'wah, whatever you want to call it. He all get a da'wah, right? Anything goes da'wah. Right? But now, people came after him, some of the modern, Ikhwani and Qutbi, they started to learn, because say Qutb was jahil in Aqidah. But then some of the later ones who had to follow them, they started to ground themselves in Aqidah the Salaf. And they would teach the books, Kashf Shubahat, the books of the Salaf. But they would, of course, they wouldn't go full throttle with it. They would start bringing some batil explanations and stuff now. But they would start to trick some of the youth. Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq, who Sheikh Rabi' Hafidahullah was patient with him for like 10 years. So they started, trying to gather the youth by saying now, okay, we're Salafi too. And the people will get tricked by this. And then they get carried away. Now you start finding them having some hizbi understanding. Or, or a deviant understanding of this aqidah, or this minhaj. So, the point that I'm saying is that, I don't want to deviate off the topic, but in reality it's not really deviating from it, because it's really trying to elaborate on what Imam Ahmad was doing, he was clarifying the correct belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah when it came to the Quran. So it's important to know the correct Aqidah. This is a safeguard. Safeguard. So he goes on to say, we have about maybe 7 more minutes, inshallah. 7 more minutes, then we're going to complete, inshallah. So he brings different statements of Ahmad in relation to people who hold these views of the Quran being created and so on and so forth. So we're going to go past that, because I think the ones we mentioned were sufficient enough. Then he goes on to say that Imam Zahabi brings his Abu Muzahim al-Khaqani. He said, قال لي عمي, he said, my maternal uncle, Abdul Rahman ibn Yahya ibn Khaqan, he said that al-Mutawakkil Amra al-Mutawakkil, that Mutawakkil had ordered him that Ahmad should be asked about those who should be appointed as judges. So now you see Mutawakkil, he ordered that he go to Ahmad and ask him who should be appointed as judges. Well, you see that the previous rulers didn't do this. So as I mentioned, the punishment started to be light, and now he was able to teach, and also the leader would send people out to him to get his advice. Like you find that in the Mamlaka Saudiya, that they take advice from the ulama. And the reason I bring this in, because the Irhabiyin and the Takfiriyin and the people like this, and I'm not going to say the jihadists, because that's not even a proper term to say jihadists, because they're not fighting jihad fi sabilillah. But those who claim they're fighting jihad fi sabilillah, these extreme people, they like to speak against the rulers and speak evil about the rulers and point out their mistakes. But these same rulers are those who used to consult with Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, and other than him, Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Fawzan, and so on and so forth. So, likewise, Mutawakkil, he sent people out to consult with Imam Ahmad about who should be appointed as judge, who should be appointed as judge. And he wrote a letter. And the letter was written, but the letter is, pretty long, so I think we're gonna forgo this letter because it's pretty long. It's gonna eat up the time that's necessary. So we'll forgo this particular letter, and we kind of we'll talk about the sickness of Imam Ahmad. We have about maybe 4 minutes left. Today we go in the sickness of Imam Ahmad. As you mentioned, he went through all this persecution, all of this beating. We said that the lashes were so severe that later it still had an effect on Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. So we went through, the life and trial of this great Imam. So now we end up with the sickness and the death of this great Imam. So, قال Salih said that لما كان أول ربيع الأول, he said when they came the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, and it was the year of 241. Because Imam Ahmad, he was born in 164 after the Hijrah. In 164 after the Hijrah. And he died in 241 after the Hijrah. And 241 after the Hijrah was around 855. As we said, 164 was equivalent to the Gregorian calendar of 780. And 241 after the Hijrah is in accordance to 855 in Gregorian calendar. And so that's the right, it puts him at around 74, 75 when he died. So he was born in Rabi' al-Awwal, and he died also in Rabi' al-Awwal in 241 after the Hijrah. But his son Salih said that when 241 came in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, humma abi laylat al-arba'a, وَبَّتْ وَهُوَ مَحْمُومٌ يتنفسا تنفسا شديدا. So he said that, so my father, he ran a temperature, or he was, he had a fever in the night of Arba'a, the fourth night, which is equivalent to, if you want to say the Gregorian days, Wednesday. And he he was breathing heavily, extensively. So he was sick, Imam Ahmad. And his son goes on to say, وَكُنْتُ قَدْ عَرَفْتُ إِلَّتَهُ. And he said, then I knew of his sickness. I knew of his sickness. I knew of his sickness. So we see that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he started to get ill. And it was in the Rabi al-Awwal, on a Wednesday. And out on a Friday, on Jum'ah. So Salih said that on this Wednesday, in 241, after the Hijrah, he said, my father ran a fever. And he was breathing heavily. He was breathing heavily. And then it goes on to say that Abdullah ibn Ahmad, he had died in Rabi al-Awwal, يوم الجمعة. وقال ذلك البخاري وعباس الدوري. So he said that Abu Abdullah Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he died on the Jum'ah in Rabi al-Awwal, and it was the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, the 12th. But let me double back for a second, because the way that is here, in the pages after this, there were some things mentioned before his death. So let me go back. In the pages that come after, they don't come before. So Salih also said that my father, that haraku lisanahu illa an tuwafi, that his tongue was moving. His tongue was moving until he died. That his tongue was moving until he died. Ja'ala adi haraku lisanahu illa an tuwafi, that his tongue was moving until he died. And also said that, of course, as Dhahabi mentioned, he died on Jum'ah. And it said that Khaleel said that it was reported that Marwazi, he said that the janaza is akhrajat til janaza ba'da al-munsarafa an-nas min al-Jum'ah, that the janaza was after the people had left from Jum'ah. It was after the people had left from Jum'ah. And one narration mentions that it was around Asr time. As Imam Zahabi brings after this statement, he says that Ahmad ibn Dawood al-Ahmas said that رَعَفَنَا جَنَازَةَ أَحْمَدْ مَعَ الْعَصْرِ وَدَفَنَهُ مَعَ الْغُرُوبِ. So he said that Ahmad ibn Dawood al-Ahmasi, he said that we had the janazah of Imam Ahmad around Asr time, and he was buried at the declining of the sun. And Imam Zahabi brings a narration here in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, or the from the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, that it's reported that from the end of the chain, from Abdullah ibn Amr, that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ma min Muslim yamut yawm al-Jum'ah aw laylat al-Jum'ah illa waqa'ahu Allah fitnat al-qabr." He brings a narration from Ahmad in his Musnad that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it is not a Muslim who dies on Jum'ah or the night of Jum'ah except Allah protects him from the fitna of the grave. Now, Allah Ta'ala knows best. Allah Ta'ala knows best. And of course, Zahabi was a great scholar of Islam. But from what I know, this narration is muqata', meaning that there's something missing, from the isnad. Maybe like the ulama mentioned in Mustalah Hadith, that when it's muqata', it means that there's, one, two, or more, maybe Sahaba mentioned missing from the chain. Huwa ma saqata min isnad وراها واحد قبل الصحابي, something like this, right? So, but nonetheless, it can be strengthened with another narration with it from Anas ibn Malik, but nonetheless, this is a narration that he brings in relation to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that whoever dies on the night of Jum'ah or the day of Jum'ah, Allah will protect them from the punishment, from the fitna of the grave. And in closing, it was said that, as Imam Zahabi brings, that Ibn Ishaq al-Khurasani, he said that, she reported that Bunan ibn Ahmad al-Qassabani, he said that, indeed I had witnessed, or I was present at the janazah of Ahmad. And he said that there were, listen to this, there were 800,000 men and 600,000 women. 800,000 men and 600,000 women. And another narration said that Mutawakkil had sent out some men. As Imam Zahabi mentions, Ashireen Rajilan. He sent out 20 men to trace the footsteps, they count the footsteps of the people. And it was said that it was close to maybe 2 million people at his janazah. So you see this great Imam, he had an extensive funeral prayer and the people loved him. And I remember some years ago reading that I believe there were some Christians also who were there. Because I know some Christians that actually visited him once when he was alive. They said, we heard about you in our town. We wanted to meet you. But I remember some years ago that there was a narration mentioning something about Christians being there, they becoming Muslim. I have to go back to verify, to check. But nonetheless, this great Imam, as his witness in his life, that he was loved by the people, and that his death also showed it by having 800,000 men and over 600,000 women present at his janazah. And it was also said by Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, if I remember correctly, and our brother Abu Abdus Salam Jayani can correct me, I believe that it was about 500,000 people at his janazah, Sheikh bin Baz, 500,000 or something like this at the janazah. And it was in the paper, and not only in the paper overseas, but also here. It was covered here. Because of course for the kuffar, this is unheard of. It's unheard of. Even their movie stars don't have this kind of turnout. Don't have this kind of turnout. They may get a few thousand, but they don't get in the hundreds of thousands. It's unheard of. So, with that being said, we hope that we did justice to this topic as a whole, not just tonight, as a whole. And please forgive me for any interruption. Of course, I had a little coughing going on in the beginning and a few other things. So please forgive me. And we hope that once again, that Allah accepted from me, accepted from you. So we say, Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa quli qawli hadha, astaghfirullah li wa lakum, wa nas'alullaha tawfiq tabat. حفظكم الله من كل شر أسكنكم في جناته. Anything that was correct from Allah alone, anything from mistake myself and the shaitan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.